Okay, we are live. Happy Friday, everyone. Um, Today is another installment of the Fast Forward Your Business series of chats and interviews that I am holding by myself or bringing in guests with the desire and idea to help creatives just like me, just like everyone else I speak to. We all sometimes at times feel alone in this whole entrepreneurship, but the reality is that we are never alone. Whatever we're experiencing, someone else close to us or on the other side of the world is also going through. So by bringing people inside us from the fashion industry and putting them in front of you, we can have conversations, we can showcase how they're doing something, how they have launched, how they're forging their way forward, and how they have just the same problems, challenges, and struggles as all of us. So today I'm super excited because I'm bringing in someone from the other side of the world, from across the ocean, and she's doing some exciting things. I've been following her for a while. I've been in touch with her, and I've even written a blog post about her. So I'm going to bring her in now, and she will introduce herself and tell you all about what she's doing. So hold on. Hello, Natalie.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on. I love having opportunities like this to talk to more people. So
oh, thank you. No, it's amazing to have you, and thank you for getting up so early in the morning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had a little like time difference thing, but yeah, no, it worked out pretty good.
We made it.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So will you introduce yourself and tell what you're doing and where you're located? Where on the other side of the world are you?
So my name's Natalie. I'm located in Seattle. I'm actually in a suburb just outside of Seattle, but since I work with international clients and most of my audience is international, everybody pretty much knows what Seattle is in the USA. So that's where I'm located. I am the owner of Points of Measure, which is an educational platform for fashion professionals. And I also do client work through that. So I do like freelance design work through that. And that's actually how it started. And then I also have another brand that I am starting, which is called Nascent, and that will be launching later this year.
Okay, that's amazing. We'll get back to that little idea as well. But first of all, how did you end up doing what you're doing now? You know, why have you called it Points of Measure? What's it about?
It's so funny because I actually kind of started it for myself, and it has just changed so much so quickly. So I started freelancing in 2015 while I was searching for a job in the industry, and I continued to freelance while I was working in the industry. And so it started as just my freelance portfolio. So it was actually like under a different name. And then while I was working in the industry, I started to realize that we had all of these processes and practices in our firm, and that we were doing things that people could have done from home. But I never learned any of that at university. And I paid like a lot of money to go to university, and I didn't learn any of that stuff until I got into the industry. And I was like, wow, these like tech packs that we create, I like people could use these. And so I got this idea for Points of Measure because I was a technical designer, and your points of measure are essentially like the backbone of your tech pack. And so I looked up to see if the name had been taken, and it hadn't. So I just jumped on that and started making that into my freelance portfolio with the idea of eventually like having education and stuff like that on it.
That's amazing. Have you ever wondered, this is out of pure my own curiosity, but have you ever wondered why is it that colleges don't train on all the stuff that we find and learn in the industry?
Yeah, I have asked myself that. I actually got asked last year if I would teach at the university that I went to, and I turned them down because I just like the curriculum. Yes, it's like a good foundation, but I feel like I even knew, because I had been passionate about fashion for so long, and reading books and trying to learn as much as I could before I went to school. And I feel like so much of it aside, I think the only thing that was really like eye-opening that I learned in college about fashion was tech packs, because I didn't know that was a thing. And how to draw CADs, which I knew like what they were, but I didn't know how to draw them. So aside from that, yeah, I really wish that there was more like industry experience within the program that I was in. I had a couple teachers who had been in the industry, but I felt like it was so like high level. I don't know. I think there could have been some more in-depth information or like real life examples.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I may have to bring someone in to kind of demystify it for us. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I think it's because the teachers are so removed from the industry, they've been teaching for such a long time, they don't know what's inside. But
Right, right. Well, one of the books that I actually reference a lot of the time is Technical Source Book for Designers. And I know a lot of people that are in my audience actually use that book too. And that was actually written by one of my professors. And she ended up, her mother got sick. So when I was there, I didn't actually have her as a teacher. She was there for like a few months. And so I think if she had been there, it would have been a little bit different because I know that she kind of had like a much larger knowledge of the fashion industry and had been in it for a really long time and working in China and like all over the world. So I think it would have been a little bit different.
yeah. So why did you pick to start your business on technical design? Because the dream and the desire is always to go into the creativity, right? And everyone wants to know how to launch a brand. You know, it's all about the zhuzhed up kind of
Yes.
side of the industry.
And fun stuff.
Yeah,
So I have always been told that I have a right and left brain. So I got a degree in apparel design and I also got a degree in accounting. So I definitely have like those two sides of myself. And so I feel like technical design was kind of like a marriage of that because it's so technical and there's so many factors that work into it that I was just like totally fascinated by it. And when I started freelancing, I was freelancing on Fiverr and I started to see that so many of the people who were reaching out to me, they were needing CADs. And then eventually it was like, okay, I need a tech pack because I would explain to them like you need this as well. Like you can't just go to a factory with sketches.
yeah,
So I think it kind of blossomed from there as well. But I do think it had a big part of it was where I kind of ended up in the industry when I got hired out of school.
yeah. And so now you have clients coming, what, designers or startups? Who's your main client? That
Yeah. So the majority are either, individuals who have an idea. I've had a few where it's like kind of like a specialized product, um, like, like a specialized apron or something that they can get a copyright on or a trademark on. And the majority I would say are either like smaller startup brands or just like individuals who are like, okay, I have all these ideas, like what do I do now?
yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the first step? How do you guide them? Where do you go with that? That's
So
like a can of worms, right?
yeah. And I have worked obviously with like some bigger brands as well, but I would
Yeah,
say that those are more like far and few between because they're usually just trying to like fill in
yeah,
while we're hiring someone full time. But usually what I would do, and this was before Points and Measure was started, and this is why I started Points and Measure because I kept having to re-explain myself. But basically, I would kind of give them a brief overview of like, okay, here I am happy to like create technical sketches for you. This is kind of what a technical sketch is. It's not going to be a fashion illustration. Here's the difference between the two. And if this is what you're looking for, I can definitely create that if that's all you need. But eventually, you're going to need a tech pack and you're going to be needing to invest more money if you're wanting to like move forward with this.
yeah. And what have you? I mean, in my experience, when I help entrepreneurs when they're starting out, one conversation like this leads to like a million others. And you also have an accounting background. You kind of all of a sudden realize that the bigger picture has so many other holes in it, and you just almost sometimes you don't know even where to start to
Oh,
help.
yeah. And I mean, even as an experienced designer, I think that the industry is always changing and there's always new things you're learning and there's always new people you're meeting. So it's always kind of like, oh man, like I didn't think about that way, or
Yeah,
there's this whole, or, yeah, it's definitely very confusing. And I think as like a client service, I have always tried to be very, just clear and trying to not overwhelm them with too much information.
Mm.
And I think that's why it was really important that I started Points and Measure, because I wanted to be able to kind of give them like a brief overview and then be like, if you want to learn more, you can go here and read about this, and this is the process and stuff. But like, I think that giving too much information scares people away.
Yeah. Yeah. So Point of Measure, you started it online, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Lucky, because we have to be online now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything I've pretty much done has been online.
How, yeah, amazing. Because so many people are now struggling to move from offline to online, and it just doesn't happen like this. I mean, website, doesn't happen overnight, and
No, no.
that's what people don't realize. But how have you managed to kind of keep momentum and get found? Because it's so noisy out there online.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is a big one. I feel like I'm still working through that. So, but when I was first starting, and I went online, I was definitely, I mean, if you're in a freelance space, right, you have to make sure that you are able to provide your service completely online, or you're able to get packages from your client and review samples that way or whatever. So there's definitely ways around it, but it is a little bit harder than being like, in an office with all of your forms and everything and your coworkers.
Yeah.
But in terms of like getting found, I would say like the number one thing that I had to learn was patience. Like, you're not going to get, I'm sure there are those people who have started a blog and gotten 4 million followers overnight. I'm not saying that's not possible, but it's not the norm. And that's a good thing, because I mean, you're going to learn as you go, and you're going to grow, and you're going to just get better and better. So I think just having that patience and trying different things, like, don't be afraid to, I remember when I first started, I was just putting up, like my CADs on Instagram. And I remember I was like, I only have like 25 followers. Like, who cares? I'm just going to like start putting up other stuff and see what sticks. And it's so fun to see what people respond to, because it's never what you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. And interesting that we are talking about this online business of yours at the moment, because I feel that now that travel is suspended, when things do reopen, we still won't be able to travel and go and see factories. So
Yeah.
you're already ahead of the curve because you work virtually with clients. So what kind of what have you had to adjust, or what tips can you give someone who would be working with a factory virtually? Because I think it would be normal for people to worry and think that they can't manufacture, they can't develop new ideas virtually. But you and I know that we can.
Yeah. I mean, I think just finding a process that works for you, and everybody's going to be different, and every factory is going to be different. So just being flexible in your process, I think, is really important, and trying to not like be stuck in your ways, like just trying to be flexible in what's going to work. I mean, pictures can go so far. There's also like 3D modeling for fitting. Some factories use that programming. And then obviously just video. I mean, really, video and being in person really aren't that different. As long as like, for example, if you're fitting something, if you know what angles to like bring your camera in and kind of have that flexibility to show the areas that are problem areas and stuff like that.
Yeah. And in fact, actually, the advantage with video is that you can record it and you can refer to it again and again, and it becomes a form of documentation of, I said this, you said that.
Yes, yes, that's so true. That's such a good point. Yeah, that's a great point. I agree with that. And that can be really important if there are certain things that are disagreements in the future, or even not necessarily disagreements, but just needing to go back and see, like, why did we make this decision? Because especially when you're working with a ton of product, you can go down the line and be like, man, like, why did we decide to do that again? The company that I worked at when I was at my 9 to 5, we had products that would last over 10 years in our catalog. So there was a bit of like needing to go back and being like, why did we make this decision? Or like, why did we want it to fit this way? So that's definitely an important piece, is to always
Yeah.
have notes or know why you're making.
Yeah, and your tech pack, keeping it up to date and all that. Yeah. Actually, I think here what's really important, I've just realized recently, was that creating processes and, these standard operating processes that, big companies have, SOPs. I think fashion should have them, but no one ever bothers, right? Because actually the grayness and the dysfunctionality of the industry suits everyone. But I think that they're more important now than ever, because of having to work virtually. And a few years ago, I actually agreed to work on a project that was due for delivery yesterday. And my manufacturer also agreed to do it yesterday. And we did everything so fast. I had no time to jump on a plane and go and quality control it. And I remember thinking, how am I going to do this? And deciding Skype. We're going to Skype and he's going to show me every single detail.
Yeah.
And everything was fine, except when we got the production, the one thing I assumed was going to be done, i.e. the labels, the branding labels, they weren't there on the entire production. So
oh my gosh. Oh, that's a nightmare.
But so that I was reminded the other day of this, and how had I had a checklist that, it had everything, even the smallest of details, that would have been spotted. And so I think it's possible for us to continue functioning and running our brands and, and develop new products virtually, but we just have to really tighten up our processes and systems.
I totally agree with that. And I think that I had a very unique experience when I was working in my 9 to 5, because my technical design team was very much like me. Like, we were had processes. We had a whole handbook for bringing on interns or assistants. And I kind of adopted those same processes when I started my own business. But it's funny too, because and this is something that I was hoping that would come up naturally in this, but at least in the society that I was brought up in, we are always constantly being taught to ask for permission. And we're taught by our parents to ask for permission. We're taught by our employers to ask for permission. Our teachers, like any situation, you're always taught to ask for permission. But when you start your own business, you are the decider. You're the one that's in control. And it's very hard to get out of that mindset of, okay, like, who do I ask to make sure this is okay, or that I'm making the right decision? And so I think that was one of the biggest things for me, was to teach myself that it's like, me making the decision and being confident in it is okay.
Yeah, you're totally right. And no one really talks about it. No one tells you that there's no rules in the industry and no standards. And I think that's one of the biggest preconceptions people enter the industry with, especially those who have worked in another, industry. People later in life come into fashion. They assume it's regulated, like finance or some other industries. And they come to this like chaos where everything works and goes. And I often,
chaos, that's such a good word.
Yeah, and I often, with my clients and people I work with, I often kind of joke that there's no fashion police, that, no one's going to reprimand them. They can just...
Yes. And that's part of why we're having problems, with ethics and sustainability.
Yeah.
So, I see the industry changing, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, we'll touch on this in a second, but let me just quickly ask you, what is the biggest issue, misconception, or problem you see people assuming, making assumption that this is how it is, I don't need help with this or whatever, and then you're like, actually
you do. I think in terms of working with clients, I would say like tech packs is a big one. A lot of people think that they can just do like a 1-page spec sheet, and that's just not the case. You need way more information than that. And I would say another big one, like in terms of my audience and what I've seen, is that they think that there are sizing standards, and that is not the case either. And that's why you end up fitting in so many different sizes across brands, because there's some general like trends, but there is no standard for...
That is such a good point and such a frustration. Why do you think that is? How can it be resolved?
There is like technically a standard in the EU. I'm not sure because I don't use that sizing, but I was doing a project a little while ago and I saw that. And there obviously is like the trend data that tracks some of that information and releases every few years or whatever. But I honestly, to some degree, it is frustrating and it is like hard, but I always try to look at something as like an optimist and like how can we use this as a benefit? And I always use the example of Lululemon. They have done such an amazing job of teaching their customer about sizing because they just have like what 0246, but they're not like standard 0246.
Mm-hmm.
So they're teaching their customer why they fit in a certain size and to stop like having their customer associate with a certain size, because there can be some like, oh, I fit in a bigger size in this brand, and it makes you like feel bad.
I
um
didn't know about that. How do they do that?
so they I like I don't know exactly what their whole like sizing chart is,
Yeah.
but I do know they have sort of like a whole program behind like teaching their customers about why they fit in a certain size and kind of like what the fit should be. And I think it builds actually a lot of brand loyalty, and
Yeah,
they really
sure.
like, connect with their customer on it because their customer knows what size they are,
Yeah.
and they have people in their stores who are educating people on the sizing when they come in. So I think it's just kind of like, even though there's not sizing standards and that can be really frustrating, there are ways to use it to your advantage to really connect with your customers.
Yeah, completely. And if you're a brand like Lululemon, it just means that once you know what fits you well, you don't have to go to the shop. You can just buy online from anywhere.
Right, exactly. And they're extremely consistent across their sizing. So you already know what you're going to fit in, which is great. And that's how it should be in your brand. You should be having consistent sizing. I mean, the cool thing about it is you could call your sizing anything. Like you could have
Yeah.
a size called giraffe, so you can really do whatever you want and be super creative with it, as long as you're educating your customers.
Yeah, and that consistency, what it would have to be maintained via the sample, via the patterns, the samples,
Yeah.
etc. So, what would you advise someone to do to create a size chart? And even if they're changing factories or pattern cutters, they issue the size chart, right?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely one of the first things that you should do is do your research, figure out who your customer is, what type of body type they have, and then create a size chart that goes along with that. You can choose, your size range to be huge or very small, depending on who your customer is. But that is definitely a big thing to determine first, because you're going to be using it for your factories, you're going to be using it for your customers, you're going to be using it internally for fitting, just so that all of your sizing is consistent across all of your styles.
Yeah, that's so important. Amazing. So, what do you think will happen now? Where's your crystal ball? What kind of
on what's happening in the world?
Yeah, I mean, how do you think? Because the last few days have been, mildly obsessed with the realization how much bigger and deeper this change
Will
will
go. Yeah.
impact the fashion industry.
Yeah.
Aside from brands, going bust left, right, and center, I think there's like layers and layers and layers of impact that this will have. But what's your kind of take on it? What do you think will change, and what do you want to see change?
So I think that for a while now, the ethics and sustainability movement has really started to gain traction. I mean, I remember when that first started, I wrote a paper on it in 2010, uh, and it's gained so much traction. Just I feel like in the last few years, it's really like started to dawn on people, like the atrocities that have happened in the fashion industry. And so I think this happening is really going to shoot that forward. It's going to snowball and become even bigger. So I think that um, people are going to be letting go of fast fashion entirely. I mean, Forever 21 already went under, and I think more of that is going to happen, and people are going to definitely be investing in pieces just like we did a long, long time ago. We're going to be investing in quality pieces and saving up for quality pieces that will last in our wardrobes for a really long time. And I
Yeah.
think the other side of it too is, at least in my country, I think that we're going to have more domestic manufacturing because we have sent so much of it across seas. And now with this kind of happening, I think there's going to be a little bit of a resurgence in domestic manufacturing in the USA.
Tell me a little bit about that, because you have the New York hub for fashion manufacturing, the meatpacking district, right? And I know that there's a big hub in LA.
Yeah.
Where else? Is there others?
So there are some factories actually in Washington.
Okay.
Most of them are bag factories, and they're definitely smaller. Filson has their own factory right on their headquartered shop. And then I know there are some factories in like the Midwest, I believe. But I mean, honestly, there aren't a ton. And a lot of them are, it's not like what you find in China or Vietnam or, across seas. So I think that people will be investing and seeing that as an investment opportunity to start a factory in the US. And I see that probably happening more like in the central part of the country or the Midwest. For sure. Maybe Texas. I think there are some factories in Texas.
Yeah. We had another interview with designer and fashion business owner from Slovenia, and she was talking, Petra, she was talking a lot about the short supply chain and how this is the future. And, and I know that she's believed that before this crisis, but now the crisis has actually brought it to the attention of everyone. Whether you're a believer or not, now you can just see it.
Yes. I was actually just having this conversation yesterday. I completely agree. And oh my gosh, who is it? Is it Zara that has like a really streamlined production process? Or at least I wrote a paper on it a long time ago, so forgive me, I can't remember everything. But yes, and I think that's kind of like the beginning of where that started. And now I agree, I think that's going to be kind of like a snowball effect that other brands are going to be starting to follow that same process.
Yeah.
I think oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I don't think it's that scary. People think it's really scary, but you can start really small with so much unemployment, you can train people, you can maybe even get grants to train people, or you can hire people that are trained, but not hire them full-time. They can be part-time. You can increase their hours. You don't have to be like proper employer. I mean, there's like so many ways you can slice it and dice it and employ people and get your own little unit going. And if you want, you can stop it when this is over and you get back to, traveling, if that happens, or you can grow it.
Yeah, I think that there are so many options in terms of how you run your business and kind of what your future looks like, because you can contract employees, you can find people on freelance websites just like me. And I think that a lot of people, when they start out, they kind of have like this idea of what the industry is, and don't necessarily think about those alternative options that may actually fit their business model at the moment better. Yeah. And I agree that like you can change later. You can start one way and you can, your business can morph with you as you grow. Yeah. So I think people feel like, oh, I just have to have it all figured out right away. And like, that's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there's this tendency to only look within the industry and copy and mirror what other people are doing. And therefore, everyone wants to have a studio with all the people inside. Yeah. Whereas now we all see that you don't have to have a big studio. You can have people outside and still run your business probably more efficiently.
Yeah, yeah. And I've started to take note of that, because I think as like a small business owner, or at least for me, and I've heard other people say this too, it's kind of like that imposter syndrome. If you don't like have, a big company or whatever, it feels very much like you aren't real. Your business isn't real, even though it is. So I started to like really try to pay attention to people I follow and see what is actually going on behind the scenes. And if you really take notice, so many of them are working in small, tiny studio spaces inside of their house. And it's all about kind of like the smoke and mirrors that I feel like so many people in the industry feel like they have to like put on that front of, oh, I'm in my studio. But I don't think like what's wrong with
the cupboard, right?
Yeah. What's wrong though with saying, and that's kind of like what Points and Measure is about. It's like, what's wrong with starting in your house? Like, what is wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. And like, I don't need to sit here and lie and say that I have this huge studio space and whatever, because I want to be a mentor for people who want to get started. And honestly, you can't afford a studio space when you first start out, and you probably shouldn't be spending your money there first. There's other things you should be investing in.
Exactly. And I think also it's about surviving in business and being cash positive, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
and I think, in fact, yesterday I was talking how important cash is for businesses. And with this downturn, a few manufacturers I spoke to a few days ago while I was writing an article on the changes for the supply chain. But I had completely overlooked the issue of cash. And one manufacturer highlighted to me that, from now on, the nightmare for them would be that everything would have to be cash paid. And all these factories very often are relying on brands to pay them, and they're always asking for discounts or to pay them late, etc. And he was like, where am I going to find the cash to pay for everything in cash, to make your production and wait for you to pay me later?
Yeah, I mean, it's a trickle down effect, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's a good point that may end up changing now too, because it's not just the small businesses who are affected by this. I mean, it's the entire supply chain is
Yeah.
affected. The factories are affected too, just as much as you may feel affected,
Yeah,
if
completely.
not more.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I see at the corner of your screen a little beautiful dress hanging. So tell us, yay, that's it. So tell us about the new brand that you're launching, and how do you feel about launching it? I mean, is this situation making you nervous, changing your plans, or?
So yeah, this is just a foundation. So this will be underneath of a dress. So that's like a bone corset and everything. Um, and crinoline and all that stuff. But it is interesting. Like I said, I always try to find like the positive and be the optimist. So I had actually planned to, I've been working on this brand for 5 years, I
Oh,
think,
wow, really?
and morphing it and changing it into kind of what it has become now. And I was going to launch it last year. And it ended up being that I kind of had like some personal stuff that happened with my family. And so it kind of got postponed, and I wasn't like totally in it in that headspace. So I just like focused on points of measure at that time. And it's so funny, if I had have launched it, it would have been probably, last month, this month, and it would have been so heartbreaking to have worked so hard. And all of the fashion shows have been canceled. There aren't celebrities looking for dresses right now. Um, and the attention of the media is not looking at something like this.
Mm.
So I think it's a blessing in disguise. But I am still planning to launch this year, at the absolute latest, the beginning of next year. But definitely I'm hoping this year.
And
But
what kind of a brand is it? What would it be about?
so it's 100% silk, hand dyed gowns. So I don't like to say hand painted because it's not paint, it's dye, but same kind of concept. But they are like full scale couture gowns. It'll be demi-couture because I don't have a studio space to do couture fittings with clients yet.
Wow.
But so it'll be demi-couture for now, and I'll do some like smaller things like um, accessories. And then it'll also be, so I'm kind of marketing it as an artist website. So it'll be like wearable textile art. And then I will also have like my original paintings. So I actually started out my career as a muralist. So this is kind of me marrying my two passions, which is art and fashion.
Where did the counting come into this?
Oh my gosh. Well, I
A
definitely
complete left field, because you're
I
obviously creative.
I definitely wanted to have that like business background for myself, and kind of have, I'm not a risk taker. So I definitely wanted to have something I could fall back to if, my other plans didn't work out. But it's actually kind of funny, and I haven't actually said this on any interview I've ever been on. So this is new content. I actually made a deal with my dad. So my parents paid for my college. I only have like a small amount of student loan that I took out. And the deal was that they would, because I wanted to go to art school and they wouldn't pay for that. So the deal was that if I got an accounting degree, they would pay for a fashion degree as well. So I did both so that I could get my fashion degree.
So my story is quite similar, except no one paid for it. I had to take loans, but I did also degree in politics and economics for 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then I went into fashion. So yeah,
Well,
similar.
that
And I meet so many people with the same story.
Yeah, it translates so much into the fashion industry too. I mean, the fashion industry has all of those, sectors to it as well. So I think it really, I think it fits in for sure.
Yeah, amazing. So you're going to have two brands then to look after, right? And promote and.
Yeah, and
Is
that's
one
something.
going to be, kind of hand holding the other, and is
Yeah.
one going to provide the money and the finances for the other, or?
Right. So it's definitely been a juggling act. And I have seen so much advice from other professionals to just focus on one. But like having both makes me so happy that I'm willing to kind of like have them each take a little bit longer and have a little bit less focus while I'm juggling both. But so kind of right now, the plan is I've been very quietly phasing out my client service on Points of Measure, and I'm focusing more on the digital products that I offer and the education that I offer. And so that will start to kind of, I've kind of gotten to a place where it's pretty like seamless. I have a process behind it. So it's not taking as much time. I think the biggest thing that I struggle with is social media because that's just like not who I am. So that's been really hard for me. So
It
I'm
takes
still
so much,
trying,
doesn't it?
still working on it.
Yeah.
And then I'll be focusing probably for like about the next year mainly on getting my brand started and marketed and all of that.
Yeah.
And then the majority of my income will most likely come from my brand. And then I'll have like basically like a side gig will be Points of Measure.
Oh, really? So they're going to reverse?
They're going to reverse because my client service was such a huge part of my income. And now that I've been slowly phasing it out, obviously that has like changed a little bit. Um, but I think it kind of depends too. Like as I grow, obviously more people are buying my digital products. So it just kind of depends. And I have sort of like some ideas of where I want Points of Measure to go and what I want it to be. So it kind of depends what path I take. And it could be the opposite. I guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah. And I have to say, your resources on Points of Measure are amazing.
Thank you.
And they're so well priced. So it's a total no-brainer that anyone wanting to know more
Thank you.
technical
Thank you
skills
so
should just
much.
like
It's been really cool
go
to
there.
see. To I always have been focusing on like marketing to new designers who want to kind of like DIY their way through starting
Mm.
their brand. And I've started to realize that a large part of my audience is actually freelancers, just like I was. So
Yeah.
I've been trying to focus a little bit more on providing information for them on freelancing and how my products can help them in their freelance careers as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So where can people find you? Where can they go and benefit of that wealth of knowledge?
Pointsofmeasure.com is a
Okay.
great place to go. It has links to, I have a free fashion resource directory with over 120 resources on it, completely free. You don't have to give me your email or anything like that. It has my education blog, which has all of my educational series on it. And it also has my digital products and links to all of my social media.
And what sort of services do you, when you say that you work with clients, what kind of services do you provide? What do you do?
So this year I changed to because I was doing like a la carte services, and I have switched to I have one package which is 10 um 10 designs. I design an entire collection for you, and then the other one is just one-on-one design consultation. So if you have questions about fitting or just kind of like the process of fashion design or anything really, I provide one-on-one
Yeah.
consultations.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
so cool. Okay, well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining us.
thank you so much for having me on. And, it's been so great to get to know you kind of online.
I
And
know.
it's cool to finally see you in person. So,
Yeah, you too. And I'm super excited for your new brand. I can't wait
thank
to
you.
see it.
Thank you so much. I'll definitely be posting a little bit of that on Points of Measure. So you guys will see some.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, and I'll put all the links to access to you and to all your resources, etc. Because honestly, they're a must.
Oh, thank you so much. I
So
really
thank you
appreciate
for creating them.
it.
Cool. Okay.
Awesome. Thank
See you
you.
soon. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.